The low hum of the baby monitor on my nightstand used to be a sound of comfort, a digital umbilical cord connecting me to my sleeping daughter. But last night, that hum became the soundtrack to my world crumbling. I heard my wife's voice, not in a soothing whisper to our child, but a breathless, urgent murmur from the living room downstairs. Then I heard his voice, my best friend Mark. They weren't just talking. The sounds that followed were unmistakable, a primal betrayal that ripped through the quiet hum and tore my life apart. Rage came first, hot and blinding, but then a cold, chilling clarity settled in. They thought I was asleep. They thought I was a fool. You think you know how this ends, a bitter divorce, a fistfight, think again. What I uncovered next and the plan I'm setting in motion is far more satisfying. Before diving in, hit that subscribe button and comment below. Have you ever dealt with betrayal? Let's hear your stories. Part 1, The Echoes in the Static. My name is Frank Morrison. I'm 48 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I believed my life was a quiet success story written in the neat, predictable script of suburban America. I'm a project manager for a mid-sized construction firm, a job that's more about managing egos and spreadsheets than swinging a hammer, but it pays the bills. It paid for our 4-bedroom house in a leafy Ohio suburb, the one with the slightly too big mortgage and the perfectly manicured lawn that my wife, Sarah, was so proud of. It paid for our daughter Lily's ballet lessons and my absurdly expensive collection of craft beers in the garage fridge. For 20 years, Sarah had been the architect of our life. I was just the guy paying for the materials. She was beautiful, sharp, and had a laugh that could make you forget a 16-hour workday. We were a team, or so I thought. We had fallen into that comfortable, slightly worn groove that long-term couples do. The passion had cooled to a warm, predictable ember, but the foundation felt solid. We had history, we had Lily, we had our Saturday night ritual of a movie on the couch and our Sunday morning pancakes. These were the load-bearing walls of our marriage, and I never once thought to check them for cracks. Lately, though, the silence in the house had started to feel different. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of two people comfortable in each other's presence. It was a weighted silence, thick with unspoken thoughts. Sarah had become more distant, her phone a permanent extension of her hand, angled away from me just so. She started going to a new yoga class 3 nights a week, coming home smelling of lavender and sweat, her eyes shining with an energy I hadn't seen in years. "It's my escape," she'd say with a dismissive wave. "Every woman needs one," I like a fool had encouraged it. "Whatever makes you happy, honey," I'd replied, oblivious to the fact that her happiness was being manufactured somewhere outside our marriage. The irony, the gut-wrenching, hilarious irony, is that Mark was my escape. Mark was my best friend, the guy I'd known since college. He was the one I called when a client was driving me insane, or when I needed a hand moving a new grill onto the deck. He was single, a charismatic sales rep who always had a new story about a disastrous date or a crazy client. He was a fixture in our home, the fun uncle to Lily, the guy who'd bring over a six-pack and watch the game with me while Sarah complained about us yelling at the TV. He was family. He was my brother. And the whole time the snake was charming his way into my garden. The small signs were there, of course. They always are, aren't they? The inside jokes I wasn't a part of. The way her eyes would find his across the room at a party for just a second too long. The sudden increase in texts between them, which she explained away as him asking for advice on a gift for his sister. "You know how hopeless he is, Frank," she'd laughed, and I laughed with her. I trusted her. I trusted him. That was my fatal flaw. I was the hardworking, loyal husband, so focused on providing the perfect life that I never stopped to see who was living in it. Part 2, The Whisper on the Airwaves. The night it happened was aggressively normal, a Tuesday. I had come home late from a site visit that had gone sideways. I was tired, covered in a fine layer of drywall dust, and all I wanted was a hot shower and a cold beer. Sarah was already in her pajamas, reading on the couch. She gave me that tight, polite smile that had become her default expression. "Long day?" she asked, not looking up from her book. "The usual," I grunted, kicking off my boots. "Is Lily asleep? Went down about an hour ago." "I think she's finally getting over that cold." I went upstairs, showered, and checked on our daughter. Lily was 6, a tiny force of nature with my eyes and Sarah's stubborn chin. She was sleeping soundly, her favorite stuffed bear clutched in her arms. On her nightstand was the baby monitor, a relic from her infant years that we kept for peace of mind. Its small green light was a beacon in the dark. I turned the volume up a click, a subconscious habit, and went to our bedroom. I climbed into bed, expecting Sarah to follow shortly. The house was quiet. I was just drifting off when a soft murmur came from the monitor. At first I thought it was just static, the kind of interference you sometimes get, but then I heard it clearly. Sarah's voice, "Can't keep doing this, Mark, it's too risky." My heart stopped. I sat bolt upright, every nerve ending firing at once. It took a moment for my brain to process the impossibility of it. The receiver was in Lily's room, picking up sound from the monitor based downstairs in the living room. They were right below me, then his voice, Mark, smooth, confident, and dripping with a familiarity that made my stomach churn. "Relax, babe, he's dead to the world, you know how he sleeps." Babe, he called my wife babe. I couldn't breathe, the air in the room felt thick and heavy, like I was drowning in it. I slid out of bed and crept to the door, pressing my ear against the wood, but I didn't need to. The monitor on the nightstand was a direct line to my personal hell, broadcasting their betrayal in crystal clear audio. "He's not stupid," Sarah whispered, a fragile edge to her voice. "He's been quiet lately." "I think he suspects something." "He doesn't suspect a thing," Mark scoffed. The arrogance in his tone was a punch to the gut. "Frank's a good guy, but he sees what he wants to see. He sees the perfect wife, the perfect life." "He doesn't see you." The insidious poison in his words was expertly delivered. He wasn't just sleeping with my wife, he was rewriting our history, painting me as a clueless fool who didn't appreciate her. Then came the sound that will be burned into my memory until the day I die. A soft, wet kiss, followed by the rustle of clothing. My wife, my Sarah, giggled. It was a low, throaty sound I hadn't heard in years, a sound that I once cherished. Now it felt like a shard of glass in my ear. "God, I've missed you," she breathed. I stumbled back from the door, my hand over my mouth to stifle a cry. The room was spinning. I felt a primal rage building in my chest, a white-hot desire to storm downstairs and tear them apart with my bare hands. I pictured myself grabbing Mark by his smug throat, smashing his face into the wall. I saw myself screaming at Sarah, demanding to know how she could do this to me, to our family. But then an image of Lily, sleeping peacefully in the next room, flashed through my mind, and something else took over. A cold, calculating calm washed over the rage. Violence would be satisfying for a moment, but it would solve nothing. It would traumatize my daughter and make me the villain. No, they didn't deserve a quick, explosive end. They deserved something far more methodical. They had built this elaborate stage of lies in my own home. I decided in that moment that I would be the one to bring the curtain down, and I would do it when the audience was full. Part 3: The Anatomy of a Lie. The next morning was a masterclass in surrealism. I walked downstairs to find Sarah in the kitchen, humming as she made coffee, looking as if the most scandalous thing she'd done the night before was read an extra chapter of her book. The living room, the scene of the crime, was pristine. No evidence remained except for the faint, lingering scent of Mark's cologne, a scent I knew as well as my own. It was a spicy, expensive smell that now turned my stomach. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said cheerfully, handing me a mug. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, or maybe it did, and I was just now learning to see the lie in them. "Morning," I replied, my voice hoarse. I took a sip of the coffee, the bitter taste a perfect match for the bile rising in my throat. I had to act normal. That was the first rule of this new, twisted game I was playing. If she knew, I would lose my advantage. "Mark texted," she said, her back to me as she fiddled with the toaster. "Too casual. He's going to come over Saturday to help you with the gutters. So sweet of him." I nearly crushed the mug in my hand. "Yeah," I managed to say, my voice tight. "He's a great friend." The words felt like ash in my mouth. A great friend. My best friend, sleeping with my wife in my living room while I slept upstairs, under the same roof as our child. The days that followed were a waking nightmare. I became an unwilling spy in my own life, a ghost haunting the periphery of their affair. Every interaction was now filtered through the lens of their betrayal. A shared look, a casual touch on the arm, an inside joke, it all had a sinister new meaning. I watched them, a detached observer, cataloging every lie, every stolen moment. It was agonizing, but it was also empowering. The rage was still there, a constant, simmering fire beneath the surface, but it was now fueling a cold, clear sense of purpose. I started to dig. Sarah had always been protective of her phone, but now I knew why. One night while she was in the shower, I took my chance. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type in the passcode, our anniversary, a detail of such bitter irony it almost made me laugh. And there it was. A whole separate life lived out in text messages, hundreds of them, secret meetings, coded language, declarations of love that made my blood run cold. They talked about me. They pitied me. "He's a good man, but he doesn't ignite me," she had written. "He provides, but he doesn't see me." Mark's replies were full of saccharine reassurances and thinly veiled contempt for me. "You deserve passion, Sarah. You deserve to feel alive." I scrolled back months, then a year. It had been going on for over a year. Our anniversary dinner where she seemed so happy. She had met him for a drink that afternoon. The weekend I spent visiting my sick father. He had stayed the night. Every memory of the past year was now tainted, corrupted by their deceit. There were photos, too. Selfies of them in his car at a bar I'd never been to, a picture of them clinking wine glasses, with my wife's wedding ring in clear view. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. I felt a strange mix of emotions, profound, soul-crushing heartbreak and a detached, almost clinical fascination. How could two people I loved so much be capable of such a deep and sustained betrayal? I started to see Sarah not as the woman I had married, but as a stranger, a complex character in a tragedy of her own making. She wasn't just bored, she was seeking something. A thrill, a validation, a second chance at a life she felt she had missed. It didn't excuse her actions, not by a long shot, but for the first time, I started to see the cracks in her own foundation, the vulnerabilities that Mark had so expertly exploited. It was a flicker of empathy that surprised me, a nuance that made my plan for revenge feel even more justified. It wouldn't just be about punishment, it would be about truth. Part 4, The Unlikely Co-Conspirator. Gathering evidence became my obsession. I was no longer a husband. I was a private investigator, and my home was the crime scene. I took pictures of the texts on her phone, screen captured their social media interactions, and even installed a small, discreet keylogger on our home computer. I felt a dark thrill with each new piece of evidence, a grim satisfaction in knowing that their web of lies was being meticulously documented. I was building a case, not for a court of law, but for a court of my own making. My biggest breakthrough, however, came from the most unexpected source, Mark's ex-girlfriend, a woman named Chloe. I remembered her vaguely from a few years back. Mark had dated her for about 6 months before unceremoniously dumping her. He had painted her as crazy and clingy, a story I had accepted without question. Now I wondered if there was more to it. Finding her was easy enough through social media. Sending her a message was harder. "What do you say to a stranger? Hi, I think my best friend is sleeping with my wife, and I remember you dated him. Did he seem like a sociopathic narcissist to you, too?" I settled on something more measured, explaining that I was going through a difficult time and had some questions about Mark's character that I thought she might be able to answer. To my surprise, she replied within an hour. "Let me guess," her message read. "He's either screwed you over in a business deal or he's sleeping with your wife." We met for coffee the next day at a small cafe miles from our neighborhood. Chloe was in her late 30s, with intelligent eyes and a wry, knowing smile that told me she had seen her fair share of bullshit. I laid out the whole sordid story, from the baby monitor to the text messages. She listened patiently, nodding in all the right places, a look of grim familiarity on her face. When I was done, she took a long sip of her latte. "Sounds about right," she said. "Mark is a predator. He preys on vulnerability. He finds women who are unhappy or insecure, and he becomes whatever they need him to be. A savior, a confidant, a passionate lover, but it's all an act. He gets off on the conquest, on the idea of taking something that belongs to someone else." She then told me her own story. Mark had pursued her relentlessly, showering her with affection and promises of a future together. But once he had her, he became distant and manipulative. He cheated on her, gaslighted her, and when she finally confronted him, he turned it all around on her, making her feel like she was the one with the problem. "He told me I was imagining things," she said, her voice laced with old anger. He called me crazy to all our mutual friends. He isolated me. It took me a year to rebuild my self-esteem after him. As I listened, I realized that Mark hadn't just betrayed me, he had a pattern. He was a user, a man who left a trail of emotional wreckage in his wake, and Sarah was just his latest victim. It didn't absolve her, but it did shift my perspective. My anger at her was still there, but it was now tempered by a cold fury directed at him. He was the puppet master pulling the strings. "I have something you might find useful," Chloe said, pulling out her phone. She showed me a series of emails between her and Mark from after their breakup. In them, he admitted to his addiction to the chase and boasted about his ability to read women. In one particularly damning email, he wrote, "Frank's a good guy, but he's boring. Sarah is starved for attention." It's like taking candy from a baby. My hands clenched into fists under the table. Seeing his casual cruelty laid out in black and white was infuriating, but it was also the final piece of the puzzle. "What are you going to do?" Chloe asked, her eyes searching mine. "I'm not sure yet," I lied, but I was sure. The plan was beginning to form in my mind, a beautiful, intricate piece of machinery designed for one purpose: to expose them both in the most public and humiliating way possible. "Well," Chloe said, a slow, vengeful smile spreading across her face, "if you need a character witness, you know where to find me." In that moment, I knew I wasn't just a man seeking revenge, I was an avenger. And I had just found my first ally. Part 5, Weaving the Web. My plan needed a stage, a perfect setting for the final act, and I found it in the one event Sarah had been planning for months, my 49th birthday party. It was supposed to be a big backyard barbecue, a celebration with all our friends and family. Our friends, the people who knew me as the steady, dependable Frank, the people who knew Mark as my loyal best friend. The people who saw Sarah and me as the perfect couple. It was a stage built on a foundation of lies, and I was going to burn it to the ground. The 2 weeks leading up to the party were a blur of clandestine preparations. I became a master of deception, playing the part of the oblivious husband with an almost psychopathic level of commitment. I helped Sarah with the guest list, feigning excitement. I listened as she talked about the decorations and the menu, all the while picturing how it would all look when the truth finally came out. Behind the scenes, I was an entirely different person. I was a director, meticulously planning every detail of my production. I compiled all the evidence I had gathered into a devastating digital portfolio. The screenshots of the texts, the photos of them together, the audio clip from the baby monitor, and the damning emails from Chloe. I edited it all together into a short, brutal video, a highlight reel of their betrayal set to a deceptively cheerful soundtrack. I also reached out to a few key people. I called my cousin, a lawyer, and had a quiet consultation. I wanted to know my rights, the best way to protect myself and Lily when the dust settled. I also set up a new bank account and began discreetly moving half of our joint savings into it. It felt cold and clinical, but I knew that in the war to come, I needed to be prepared. My most crucial move, however, involved the party itself. I knew Sarah and Mark would be on high alert, looking for any sign that I was suspicious. So I decided to give them what they wanted, a distraction. I accidentally left my phone unlocked on the kitchen counter, open to a fake email chain I had created with a female colleague. The emails were just friendly enough to be plausible, but with a hint of flirtation that I knew would catch Sarah's eye. It worked perfectly. That evening, I watched from the crack in the bedroom door as she picked up my phone, her face a mask of suspicion. I saw the flicker of relief in her eyes when she found the emails. It was a lie she could understand, a transgression she could use to justify her own. It made me predictable, it made me flawed, it made her feel safe. The next day, I overheard her on the phone with Mark, her voice light and dismissive. "I think Frank might have his own little secret," she said. "Maybe he's not so perfect after all. They thought they had me figured out. They had no idea they were walking directly into my trap." The day of the party arrived, a perfect, sunny Saturday in June. Our backyard was transformed, filled with tables, balloons, and the smell of grilling burgers. Friends and family started to arrive, a parade of smiling faces, all of them blissfully unaware of the drama that was about to unfold. I moved through the crowd, accepting birthday wishes and pats on the back, a hollow smile plastered on my face. I saw Mark arrive, a bottle of expensive bourbon in his hand. He clapped me on the shoulder, his face a picture of brotherly affection. "Happy birthday, man," he said, his voice full of false sincerity. "Getting old, aren't we?" "Tell me about it," I replied, my voice steady despite the rage pounding in my veins. Sarah was the perfect hostess, flitting between guests, her laughter bright and carefree. She and Mark exchanged a few subtle glances, a quick conspiratorial smile here, a brief touch on the arm there. They thought they were so clever, so discreet. They had no idea they were being watched, that their every move was being noted. The centerpiece of the party was a large projector screen I had set up against the back of the house. Sarah had been thrilled with the idea. "We can show a slideshow of old photos," she had exclaimed. "A trip down memory lane for your birthday." "A great idea, honey," I had said. "A real trip down memory lane." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn, I knew it was time. I gathered everyone together, my heart pounding a steady, heavy rhythm in my chest. I took the microphone, my hands surprisingly steady. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice ringing out across the quiet yard. "It means the world to me to have all our friends and family here to celebrate." I looked at Sarah, who was beaming at me from the front row, a proud smile on her face. Next to her, Mark stood with his arm casually draped over the back of her chair, the perfect picture of betrayal. "Sarah put together a little slideshow for us," I continued, "to celebrate all the years we've had together. But before we watch that, I have a little video of my own I'd like to share. A project I've been working on. It's a tribute, really, to love, to trust, and to friendship." I gave a small nod to my cousin, who was standing by the laptop. He hit play, part 6, the projector and the fury. The cheerful opening notes of "Happy Together" by the Turtles filled the backyard. The first image on the screen was a beautiful, smiling photo of Sarah and me on our wedding day. A collective awe rippled through the crowd, then the screen cut to black. A single line of text appeared, a story of a marriage. The audio began. It was the clip from the baby monitor, Sarah's voice, a breathless whisper. "Can't keep doing this, Mark, it's too risky." A gasp went through the crowd. Sarah's smile froze on her face, her eyes wide with horror. Mark's arm dropped from her chair as if it had been burned. The video continued, a brutal, relentless assault of evidence. The text messages flashed on the screen, one after another, their declarations of love and their casual dismissals of me laid bare for all to see. The photos of them together, laughing, kissing, living their secret life. Chloe's emails appeared with Mark's arrogant, cruel words highlighted in red. "Frank's a good guy, but he's boring. Sarah is starved for attention." It's like taking candy from a baby. With each new piece of evidence, the silence in the backyard grew deeper, heavier. The air crackled with tension and disbelief. I could see the looks of shock and pity on the faces of my friends, the dawning horror on the faces of Sarah's parents. The video ended with a final, devastating image, a close-up of Sarah's hand, her wedding ring glinting in the light as she held Mark's hand in his car. The music swelled to a crescendo and then cut out, plunging the yard into a stunned, deafening silence. I took the microphone again. My voice was quiet, but it carried in the still air. "Happy birthday to me," I said, a bitter, humorless smile on my face. All eyes turned to Sarah and Mark. Sarah was pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Mark looked like a cornered animal, his face a mixture of rage and panic. "Frank, Sarah started, her voice a broken whisper. "Don't," I said, my voice like ice. "Don't you dare say a word." Then all hell broke loose. Sarah's father, a quiet, gentle man I had always respected, stood up and walked over to Mark. He didn't say a word. He just drew back his fist and punched Mark square in the jaw. Mark staggered back, tripping over a lawn chair and crashing to the ground. People started shouting. Friends were pulling Sarah's father away. Sarah was sobbing hysterically. I just stood there watching the chaos unfold, a strange sense of calm washing over me. This was the fire I had started, and it was burning brighter than I could have ever imagined. Amidst the turmoil, Chloe, who I had invited, stepped forward. "He did the same thing to me," she said, her voice clear and strong. "This is who he is." The party was over. People started to leave, whispering amongst themselves, casting looks of pity at me and looks of disgust at Sarah and Mark. Within 15 minutes, the yard was empty, save for the debris of a party that had turned into a public execution. Sarah was on her knees on the grass, her body racked with sobs. Mark had picked himself up and was leaning against a tree, holding his jaw. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. "You're a dead man, Frank," he snarled. I laughed. It was a real, genuine laugh, the first one I'd had in weeks. "No, Mark," I said, walking over to him until we were inches apart. "I'm not. I'm the man who just got his life back. You, on the other hand, you're just the guy who screws his best friend's wife, and now everyone knows it." I turned and walked away, leaving him and Sarah in the ruins of the life we had once built together. I went inside, poured myself a glass of the expensive bourbon he had brought, and sat down in the quiet, empty house. The battle was over. The war for my future was just beginning. Part 7, The Dawn of a New Day. The aftermath was as messy and complicated as you'd expect. The story of my birthday party spread through our town like wildfire. Sarah and Mark became social pariahs overnight. He lost his job within a week. It turned out his company had a strict morality clause, and public humiliation at the hands of a cuckolded husband was apparently bad for business. Sarah's parents were mortified. Her mother called me crying, apologizing, and telling me they stood with me. Sarah moved out the next day. The confrontation was quiet, exhausted. There were no more tears, no more shouting. Just the hollow echo of 20 years of marriage collapsing into dust. "Why, Sarah?" I asked her as she packed a suitcase, the only question that still mattered. She finally looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. "I don't know," she whispered, and for the first time I believed she was telling the truth. "I was lost, Frank. I felt invisible. Mark, he made me feel seen. It was a fantasy, and I was stupid enough to believe it." It wasn't an excuse, but it was a reason. It was the flicker of nuance I had seen before, the story of a woman who had made a catastrophic mistake out of a deep-seated unhappiness I had been too blind to see. It didn't make me forgive her, but it allowed me to let go of some of the all-consuming hatred. The divorce was surprisingly swift. With the mountain of evidence I had, her lawyer advised her not to contest anything. I got the house, primary custody of Lily, and a significant portion of our assets. I didn't do it to punish her, I did it to protect my daughter. Rebuilding was slow. The first few months were a fog of lawyers, paperwork, and learning how to be a single father. There were nights I'd sit in the silent house, the ghost of my old life haunting every room, and wonder if I had done the right thing. The revenge had been satisfying, a spectacular moment of catharsis, but it didn't magically heal the wound. But then, little by little, the light started to come back in. Lily was my anchor. Our bond deepened, forged in the quiet moments of making breakfast together, helping her with her homework, and our new ritual of reading an extra chapter of her favorite book at bedtime. The house started to feel less like a crime scene and more like a home again, filled with her laughter instead of the echoes of betrayal. I started therapy. I had to unpack my own baggage, my own role in the breakdown of my marriage. I had been a good provider, but had I been a good partner? Had I been present? The answers were complicated, and confronting them was harder than confronting my wife's affair. It was a journey of self-discovery, one that forced me to grow in ways I never expected. About a year later, Chloe and I met for coffee again. We had stayed in touch, a strange friendship born from a shared trauma. We talked for hours, not about Mark or Sarah, but about our lives, our hopes, our futures. There was a spark there, an easy comfort that I hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, but a slow, gentle sunrise. A second chance, I still have moments of anger, of sadness. Betrayal leaves a scar that never fully fades, but it no longer defines me. I am not just the man who was cheated on, I am the man who survived. The man who fought for his daughter, for his sanity, for his future. The baby monitor sits in a box in the attic now, a silent reminder of the night my world ended, but it was also the night my new life began. A life that is quieter, simpler, and more honest than the one I had before. And for that, in a strange, twisted way, I am grateful. If this story hit home, like and subscribe for more gripping tales of love and betrayal. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you forgive or seek revenge? Your stories and perspectives fuel this community, so don't hold back. Check out the next video popping up now for another twist-filled saga. Thanks for listening.